Huawei is considered likely one of the most geopolitically significant tech companies in the world right now. Can you explain that significance globally?
Yeah, they are one of the largest makers of cell phones in the whole world, and perhaps more importantly, they're going to be among the top makers of 5G hardware, and that's going to be kind of the future of data for us. And the fears that have been expressed by some, including from within our own government, is that if the Chinese government has said or were to say, can we have a backdoor into this technology to collect data from people, including other governments or just other users, they might have to do that.
So Huawei, Dan, is facing sort of a list of charges, right? They include, accusations, anyway, stealing secrets, corporate espionage. You talked about this backdoor to the Chinese government. I mean, is there an argument that sort of suggests, well, this is part of the landscape of this industry, and maybe even some American companies might be also guilty of some of this stuff?
Well, there's a difference between speculation and what we know about Huawei's behavior. So they have been caught on a number of occasions stealing the intellectual property of their competitors, and they have been caught sending data back to the Chinese government. Also, we do have in the United States a First Amendment, and even though Apple has said, hey, look, we will work with law enforcement on a reasonable basis, they have fought the FBI and other law enforcement organizations, say, you know, look, user data, unless you have probable cause, is still private. Now, we have seen the expansion of what some call the surveillance state, which means, or surveillance capitalism, which means all data is kind of slurped up. But when it's encrypted and when it's protected, it's a vastly different circumstance than when we send data or when we have companies sending data back to the home country.
You know, Graham, it's one of the questions I asked Biana when she was here talking about her interview with Huawei's CEO. He denies categorically these allegations, but what specific evidence exists out there? What specific evidence has the U.S. government provided that say that Huawei is engaged in these activities?
Right now, Huawei is facing two sets of charges. The first one is, it's almost like a fun corporate espionage story. They're accused of trying to steal the designs for Tappy. It's a T-Mobile robot that literally taps on phones to test them. And it was of some value to T-Mobile because it helped them figure out which phones were going to have problems from consumers. And the government presented emails between Huawei executives and engineers, allegedly instructing them to take photos of it. In one case, they're accused of taking Tappy and walking out of a T-Mobile building with Tappy in a laptop bag, taking photos of it and measuring it, and then bringing it back the next day saying, oh, I didn't realize it was in my laptop bag. So there's that set. But then there's a second set of charges in which the company is accused of violating our Iran sanctions. And that's the set of charges for which the CEO's daughter, who's the CFO of the company, has been arrested. And in that case, basically, there's this other company in Iran that for a long time, Huawei has said, we work with them as a local partner, but they're not part of our company. And the government is saying that's actually a subsidiary of Huawei. And in fact, the CFO and other executives lied to banks in order to make sure that that relationship could last and that money could be made off of it.
You know, but to Anne-Marie's point, I mean, it feels as if corporate espionage has existed since corporations have existed.
And you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about the design of the smartphone.
Sure.
And how, wasn't there a lawsuit between sort of Apple and Samsung, you guys can probably correct me, about the design of the iPhone, and it just, I mean, all these smartphones basically look the same. They're all sort of ripping each other off, right?
I mean, just the idea of corporate and industrial espionage being something that everybody is saying, like Louis in Casablanca, I'm shocked that there's gambling going on here, when everybody engages in it. In fact, you know, I recall reading statistics, this was a couple of years ago, but that the world leader in industrial and corporate espionage was not China, it was France.
I think there's a greater play going on here. We're in the middle of trade talks with China, and this does actually revolve around not just corporate espionage, but traditional interstate espionage. The question is, as we have our 5G network put across our country, are we going to use products that we think maybe the Chinese government has access to? And then, of course, do they actually? Which is a question we still don't know.
Well, to what you just said, right, about, hey, maybe this is just how business works, Dan, you know, the comeback for Huawei is that the U.S. is deliberately sabotaging their business, their growth, right? You mentioned the fact that we're going to be sort of going 5G. They're a leader when it comes to 5G. And maybe this is just about, we don't want you to have access to the big marketplace that is the United States.
Well, it is correct that the U.S. has advised our carriers here, meaning the big 4 cell carriers, as well as our allies, to stop using Huawei 5G equipment. The problem with that is that Huawei is the largest maker of 5G equipment in the world. 5G is not just a faster way to use your phone. This is the connective sinew. And we've talked with everyone at most of the major cell carriers, as well as the cell phone manufacturers, and they say, look, this is going to enable things like the Internet of Things, virtual reality, augmented reality. So the types of data that we're sending is not just the same stuff that we send on our phone. It will be embedded into systems that make our cities smarter, make our cars smarter. And that type of corporate espionage is vastly different than whether you copy and pasted some code, allegedly, which Huawei has been accused of doing, and planting it into your code. How our cities run and the infrastructure of not just technology, but our world is just a fundamental shift in how we use technology.
Wow. Fascinating. Thank you so much for providing some clarity. We really appreciate it. It's really interesting stuff. Dan and Graham, thank you so much.